Welcome to Storytimer at Large, Tricia Lynn Reitler. Tricia Lynn Reitler was born February 9, 1974, in Olmsted Falls, Ohio, to Donna and Gary Reitler. She grew up there in the Cleveland suburbs. Her father was a self-employed carpenter, and her mother worked as a cleaner. Tricia attended a private religious school for much of her education, but graduated from the local public high school, Olmsted Falls High School. Olmsted Falls is one of those towns that could be the setting for a Hallmark Christmas movie. Many of the historic homes and buildings have been preserved. The west branch of the Rocky River flows through town. It is indeed very rocky, and the water flowing through those wooded areas and over picturesque rocks gives the town its name. Tricia left Ohio for Indiana Wesleyan University in Marion, Indiana after high school. Marion, Indiana is a small town between Indianapolis and Fort Wayne. On March 29, 1993, Tricia was studying. The psychology major decided to take a break around 8 o'clock that evening. She walked to a nearby store and bought a magazine and a soft drink. She left the Reliable drugstore just after 8. It was in a shopping complex with a typically busy Marsh supermarket. As Tricia walked back to her dorm, she was abducted, and sadly, no one has seen her since. Tricia's roommates reported her missing. Extensive searches were conducted. Her parents traveled to Marion immediately to help look for their daughter. Despite all these efforts, Tricia remains missing. Larry Dwayne Hall is a suspect. When he was arrested for a different murder, he had maps and newspaper articles about Tricia Lynn Reitler's disappearance and articles relating to other missing and murdered young women and girls in his van. Donald W. Grenier is also a suspect. He was a man with only one arm. Grenier abducted a young girl, Megan Musgrave, in 1999. He grabbed her when she was unaware that he was approaching her. Megan was from the small town of Hartford City, near Marion, and Grenier kept her in his van for days. He repeatedly sexually assaulted her. He threatened her, of course. He kept her tied up and duct taped. But Megan was really resourceful, and she managed to escape on Easter Sunday, and she was rescued there in Marion, Indiana. Grenier's mother lived in Marion, Indiana, and so he was actually visiting her for the Easter weekend. So while this young girl is tied up in his van in his mother's garage, he's inside eating all the delicious Easter weekend foods and enjoying family time. Megan Musgrave and her best friend nowadays have an excellent true crime podcast called Gruesome True Crime. Megan told her story on episode 2 of the podcast, and I highly recommend, if you're interested in true crime, that you give their podcast a listen. It's really an excellent podcast, and the two hosts bring a really interesting perspective in their discussions. So again, highly recommend Gruesome True Crime. I wonder, though, whether Grenier, who only had one arm, could have successfully kidnapped Tricia Lynn Reitler. Maybe. She potentially might have been more aware and cautious since she was a college student and was walking back to her dorm in the evening hours. But it's hard to say. She also would have been a bit physically stronger than a young girl and potentially could have overpowered this man with only one arm. But again, it's difficult to say. But I do think Larry Dwayne Hall is probably the person responsible for Tricia's disappearance. He lived in Wabash, Indiana. That's only a few minutes away from Marion, Indiana. He used typically a chemical-soaked rag to knock his victims unconscious. This would have happened almost immediately. He could have approached her while she's walking along and maybe had a map and came at her to sort of ask for directions, and then slipped that rag over her nose and mouth while she's walking along, and then hustled her into his van. In September of that same year, Larry Dwayne Hall abducted and murdered Jessica Roach as she was riding her bicycle on a rural road. Jessica Roach lived in Georgetown, Illinois. He left her body just over the state line in Indiana near Perrysville. Larry Dwayne Hall sometimes just left victims in fields, but sometimes dismembered them. He also claimed to sometimes dump his victims in a river. There may be unidentified remains out there from the 1980s and 1990s that, with testing, could prove to be some of these missing victims. Tragically, Tricia Lynn Reitler is still missing, as are several of the victims of Larry Dwayne Hall. If you have information that can help solve Tricia's case, please call the Marion Police Department at 765-662-9981. Again, that number is 765-662-9981. Rest in peace, Tricia Lynn Reitler. Thank you for listening to this video today. I hope you'll consider subscribing. I hope you'll consider sharing these videos. And I hope you'll consider hitting that thumbs up for justice button. I don't want to monetize any of these videos or make any money. I have a perfectly reasonable day job. But I just want to get these cases in front of the right person out there. There may be somebody who saw something, remembers something, and might be able to give a tip that can help solve one of these cases. So I thank you in advance for subscribing. Really happy that you're here helping us to potentially solve cases. And I think you and we can do some really good work together.